I'm going to propose that we'll hand over to the leader after the recess, after the discussions, see what the leader's got to say, if it's acceptable, and there's a seconder, and then I'll open it out for discussion. Is that okay? Leader.
Thanks very much, Provost, and thanks to all the members. Pleased to, I think I managed to speak to nearly everybody, and pleased to see that we managed to get consolidated proposals that our administration here is proud to move to you, and maybe ask Joe to go through some of the details, because one of the assurances that we wanted that was met the affordability gap, and if I think it's beneficial for all members that if Joe gives us that assurance.
Thank you, and through you, Provost. Members, as you can see from the sheets, there are 7 options utilising funds from 5 separate pots. If I can just explain, firstly, just when you add the total that the council will receive from the pension employer rate adjustment, and you add in the 16.717 that Council approved a few moments ago, then that total is £41.717 million. We speak about a £40 million pot, and so there's 1.717 of additional funding there. We know we're going to need probably about £1 million of that in terms of a transfer to the Leisure Trust and also to the budget and People and Culture, and that leaves £717,000 of a pure windfall. It safeguards the £40 million, and there's £717,000 that remains. And from that £717,000, the proposal before Council is that £254,000 of that is used to extend the Civic Parade initiative for a further year. That £180,000 is used to allow temporary additional posts within the corporate enforcement team. And that £400,000 is used to provide funding to support additional works in roads and pavements, with £200,000 of that funding coming from that £717,000, and the other £200,000 coming as a draw from the Renewals and Repairs Fund. In addition, the proposal for from August to provide a £50 clothing grant to 3- and 4-year-olds in early years settings whose circumstances would meet the criteria for footwear and clothing grants is £40,000, and that is also from the £717,000 windfall. It means that from that amount we are taking £674,000, and that is affordable using that balance. In terms of others, further option on half-price school meals starting in August 24, running through to June 2025, cost of £860,000. In Council, you're being asked to consider that as a first draw from the £4 million that will come before you as the year one £4 million from that £40 million. The removal of Housing and Communities Saving Options 19 that was included as in the Appendix 1 of yesterday's report to Cabinet is to remove that and provide a one-off temporary £137,000 to the Housing and Communities budget, with that £170,000 being charged against Housing and Communities for further options to come back. But in the year we're about to enter, 2024-25, a temporary sum being given in order to allow that consideration to take place. And finally, members, request the Deputy Chief Executive to bring forward a report to extend financial inclusion support to schools and early year settings for the further 6 months, costing £191,000. And that will come from a balance that is already held in previously approved funding that you gave for cost of living. So when the 7 options are considered, there's £137,000 of a draw from the General Fund uncommitted balance. You know, members, at Q3 East Ayrshire Reforms, you added £868,000 to that balance. So on the basis of that, the £137,000 is affordable. The 860 for free school meal, for half-price school meals from August, coming as a first draw from the £4 million is for your consideration. The £674,000 from the £717,000 windfall money is affordable, and the £191,000 draw from the current underspend within, or the current balance within cost of living, is also affordable, and the draw from renewals and repairs is £200,000. You added as a cabinet additional funds to that fund at March last year, and so that too is affordable. On that basis, Provost, there is seven proposals totaling £2.062 million, and they are affordable.
Thank you. Leader.
Just to confirm, in terms of some of the materials handed out in my speech, I did include the 860,000 for the free school meals, and that was moved before we went to the consolidated proposals. Provost, we've listened, and the SNP group are moving a budget today, which hopefully all others have in some way contributed and hopefully can support, and I would move.
I'll second that, Provost.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. In negotiations with the SNP group, I am happy to see that the budget proposals that Labour put forward are contained in their entirety. Notice certainly from the SNP group proposals that they weren't there for the £860,000 for free half-price school meals originally, but I'm glad they are there, and I'm glad all members hopefully can support that. So I'm more than happy to second the council leader in this budget. I'm glad that we have got there through negotiation. Thank you.
Right, we'll open it. Councillor McFadden.
The one thing that just occurs to me, in previous discussions with the leader about the school meals, which, we are continuing on now, it seems to be a very difficult thing in the future to take away from children. So I think a piece of work could be done to look to maybe make that at some point a permanent policy rather than, agreeing each year. I mean, I know myself and the leader agreed that, but I'd like to see that being an ongoing thing if possible.
No, thank you. Members, any further points, questions? We had the proposal for the leader, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Are we okay? Everybody understand? Everybody okay? Yep, thank you very much. Agreed budget, thank you very much. Straight on to item 6, which is building a future East Ayrshire capital investment programme. That's page 95. And again, it's almost the same as what the previous protocols were. So we'll bring in the leader. Leader.
Right. Thanks, Provost. Did that to me last year as well. Just in terms of the capital investment programme, we discussed this at Cabinet yesterday. We're an ambitious council down through the years. We've probably built more schools and more houses than most authorities our size. And it's important. We've still got plenty of work to do. Plenty of projects in terms of schools and Alnwick and the Doon Valley and Northwest Kilmarnock. We have significant ambitions there, and they remain, as well as other items that are in the capital programme. And as mentioned in the Cabinet yesterday, it would be our intention to, each of these key capital investments, like we did in the Northwest, we take, in particular looking at Alnwick and Stewarton and in Dunmellington, that we take all the local members with us to, with the Cabinet, to look at these facilities that are existing, just so as we can maintain our investment into these communities. There are challenges out there in terms of the way that the contract inflation and other forces are significantly inflating the prices of what we're able to deliver. And we tasked officers yesterday through Cabinet to look at how we can address some of these, to investigate them a wee bit more. And these are some of the issues I've actually mentioned to the government, because I think this is something that's felt right across Scotland, not just peculiar to East Ayrshire, that across the board over the last 12 months, we're seeing 100% increases in costs for schools and public buildings. And, there's more than just contract inflation behind that. There's other things that's going on, and we need to understand that a wee bit better to see if there's anything we can do so as we can continue to building schools, invest in public buildings, and maintain our stock effectively for our people. So that was all agreed at Cabinet yesterday. Look forward to seeing the outcome of these visits and the discussions we're going to have in the future. And but we need to keep delivering and keep moving forward. Capital programme is not just important in terms of the facilities itself. It's what it does, as we've known in the past, particularly when times are hard, when there's fewer and fewer houses getting built, when the construction industry is finding it difficult. The public sector hopefully can keep building, keep people in a job, and I hope that parties in Westminster and beyond are listening to us here. We need to keep. We're looking forward to the spring budget when hopefully some money is passed on through Barnett consequentials through to ourselves that we can possibly build more. And we need to lobby every form of government, every agency that's involved in the process, to make sure that we get our fair share and more if necessary to tackle some of the outstanding problems that we have in our communities. So I would be moving the paper promise.
Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Yeah, I'd second that, Provost.
Thank you, folks. Councillor Boyd.
Thanks, Provost, and again, thanks to Joe and the team for the work and spelling out exactly where we are with the capital project. I want to just have a wee look for a slightly other angle. When we actually get down to these projects, maybe not just capital, any project like this, been pretty new. The costs always seem to me extortionate. For example, St Marnot's Garden was 700,000, now it's 200,000. The area, we're just going to do a couple of basic passive flower beds. Some folk have got bigger back gardens than that, 200,000. And I suspect a lot of the costs come for consultants. See like that in the multi-storey site coming up. Do we really need to spend money on consultants? Have we not got our own officers skilled enough to drop these basic plans? I understand with more complex projects like the Love project for the Palace Theatre, we do need to employ consultants there, but some of the costs just seem incredible to me, and I know the public think the same. I just get this impression when the public sector comes calling, the prices go through the roof. I just don't get some of these prices. 200,000 for a small garden, and also with the Love project, I fully support it. 25 million, I think, with that for the Palace Theatre. But if you got the Hill to the other arts academy, they've spent a fifth of that, and that's an extensive project as well, but they've not had to go through the procurement process. I understand legally we have to go through procurement, but our hands are tied with this, and that adds to the cost. And again, going back to my teaching career, buying basic things for schools, pens, pencils, it'd be a lot cheaper to go into the mall and go to Poundland and buy them rather than going through procurement. So if we're serious about savings with revenue and capital, we really need to untangle some of these exorbitant costs. I don't know why we can't say to folk bidding, surely you can lower your costs here. You must be making vast profits, because they're doing the same with the private sector or with individuals with a smaller cost. I just thought I'd like to open that up there, because that's something that kind of is on my mind at times. Joe's done a brilliant job, but can we get these costs down? And I know there's inflation factors, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, no, thanks for that. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. I'm really glad to see that Cabinet have agreed to go and visit Doon Academy in the next couple of weeks, and I believe there's a visit on Monday. But I happened to visit the academy on Monday, and I was actually appalled at the state of it at this present moment. And we are expecting our children and young people to have a really good experience going to school in what we're calling a campus fit for purpose. I really look forward to the outcome of the robust review, and I hope that reflects what the people of the Doon Valley would like. but could I also ask when is the review going to be completed? Thanks.
Okay, we'll ask when the review.
Thanks, Provost. I mean, in particular in relation to the Doon Valley, we need to do it really quickly in order to bring together the timing around the wider funding thing. But at the same time, as I reflected yesterday at Cabinet, if we make a decision around one area, for instance, Doon, that has an automatic impact because of the affordability cap for both Alnwick and for Kilmarnock North West. So we've already made a good start in terms of where we are in terms of the review. We need to bring together as officers a suite of better information to give to use that really does recognise the issues around inflation, the issues around cost of borrowing, the issues around demography in terms of that. Some of that demography can then impact on educational outcomes and also the issue around community. This is not about one thing. If you only looked at money, you would do one thing, but what would that do to a local community? We need to take into account, and we need to take into account some of Linda's professional advice as well about, educational outcomes as well and the different models of education that we can have. So we need to bring all that together, and we need to do it within a timescale that doesn't mean that we're getting ourselves right out with the Leap 2 funding, model. So that's going to push us in terms of the timescales coming forward.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Thanks, Provost. And take on board what the Chief Executive just said there. It's not just a simple equation we're working with, but I can't help thinking there are members in here got great concerns for their area, the schools within their area. And I think in the paper was a good paper, but I mean, I've brought it up myself various times about affordability, and we were in the outer envelope, or was at the cusp of affordability. But we've got to remember that we were borrowing because we were dealt that this is the time to borrow because it's cheap money. And nobody could argue with that, but obviously there's another side to that as well. When things happen in the economy and interest goes up. However, I can't separate out a couple of things here. This is just one paper, but it does mention regarding Laneshaw, the LDP2. And I still think that if we don't get a new school for Laneshaw in LDP2, does that mean that the 350 houses will not go ahead? Because remember, after a long protracted debate in here regarding LDP2, it was infrastructure first. No school, no houses. Now, some councillors, like myself, have been going up there saying infrastructure first, but I can't help get the feeling that perhaps past councillor Gordon Jenkins and current councillor Ellen Friel were correct, and the rest of us were all wrong. And that's my concern. Thank you.
Thanks. I know we talk about, the new schools and we talk about developer contributions. I've got to learn more about developer contributions in the past couple of years. I never thought I would get to know. But the developer contributions only come depending on the current occupancy of a school and the pressure that puts on a school. So again, none of this is ever as straightforward as saying, so if we go ahead and actually build a school, then there is no pressure on it when they build the houses then. So there's that bit about it has to be clear that they're building houses. That's going to put pressure on the occupancy of schools. And at that stage, we need to draw the developer contributions. And I know, in the papers that Karen and others have written, we've tried to be clear, about what we're doing, around that. So it would still be the case. If there any new house building that puts pressure on public services, the rules are there around how the developer contribution, comes forward for that. So we know what was said in this chamber in terms of, that, and we're mindful of that every time we have these conversations.
Okay, thanks, folks. I propose on a second, Councillor Richardson.
Sorry, Provost. Just a couple of quick things. Just to go back to Councillor Boyd, Graham's point there about procurement, etc. Yeah, I mean, this is something that, well, we've discussed it internally within the SNP group. Would it be an idea at one of the councillor chats
when, you know, the councillors get together, maybe for officers to present to us all in a wee bit more depth about how actual procurement within the public sector and East Ayrshire Council actually works. Because a lot of us, we don't really understand it all, but a lot of the elected members would probably sort of lean towards what Councillor Boyd said. I mean, I get the impression that when the public sector comes calling, the private sector tends to, you know, milk it a wee bit, shall we say. So it would be really useful for me to understand more about how procurement works in general. And the last thing I'd just like to tag on the capital budget and the school estate, I was delighted to see 14.95 million in total put aside for the primary schools up in the northwest, split 5 million for Ronthank, 6.95 million for Hillhead, and 3 million for Mount Carmel, because those schools really need some investment. But I'd just like, last thing from me is just to the officers involved, could we please, as quickly as possible, hurry along the works that are required at the Ronthank SLC, because Eddie, the chief executive, a lot of the elected members, Linda from education, a lot of us went out there and saw the infrastructure that currently exists at Ronthank. And when we opened up, you know, the SLC at Ronthank, there was 40 kids. It was basically almost at its maximum straight away. There's kids in there that have got some real specialised needs, and they're not being catered for. If we're honest with ourselves, they're not being catered for with the infrastructure that's there. So if we could please, as quickly as possible, get moving in that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, David?
Provost, just to confirm, I'd be more than happy to deliver, along with the procurement manager, any training and support to members in relation to procurement function. It's something that is unfortunately not well understood, not well reported, and not well received. The basic concept of procurement is if you're buying 1 million pens, you should get them cheaper than if you buy 10. If you do procurement right, you'll get them cheaper. If we do procurement wrong, then you might end up paying more than you should. But procurement is a function of the council, not a team of 10 in the procurement service. So it's something that we certainly present to colleagues on, and I'll be happy to present to members on, because there's an awful lot more to it than what's been said.
Yeah, I remember it well, and you're absolutely right. Councillor Maben.
Thank you, Provost. I'd be interested in the timeline for this review. Are we talking 6 weeks or 3 months or 6 months to try and get some clarity about what's going to happen in the future? Some transparency. We're communities in the Doon Valley and up and on Thank, Stewarton. I'm worried as well about Willowbank and the ASN support. We've got a school there that's bursting to its seams. So my understanding for the papers, and I thank Joe for meeting with us and explaining through the papers, is that we are almost borrowed to our limit, and probably we shouldn't be trying to borrow much more. It wouldn't be sustainable or prudent, is what I understand. How long is this review going to take, and when can we get back to our communities with some clarity and tell them what we are able to do and what we definitely shouldn't be doing? Thank you, Provost.
Yeah, Eddie.
Thanks, Provost. You know, and within the recommendations brought forward for Cabinet, we try and set that out. You know, maybe we'll try and be firmer, you know, in terms of, we're saying we'll report it during 2024. And you're right, that same, you know, 3E, you know, subsets 3 talks about the 8%, you know, like, affordability, you know, like cap for that, and it would be broken. So we would get through that in 27, 28. That overall package that's sitting there is not affordable within the current cap that you've given us. So that's why we do need to go back and look at individual projects in terms of what we can reduce just around some of the lines that people are talking about, but then the overall projects across them, you know, like, so it's our job to come back and take it into account, all the things that, you know, we said before around, you know, finance, around demography, around educational outcomes, around impact on community, and give you that information. And it really is about us giving you that information for you to be able to take decisions that actually keep us within affordability, but still deliver on the ambition that you have each year for your communities. You know, we know we can get around each ward, that every ward has huge ambitions for their children in their communities. But what we're saying is, cumulatively, when we put that all together as a council, we can't afford everything that's down there now, and so we're going to have to come to discussions about how we do it differently. So as I said, within the papers that you've been asked to pass is given us a date of 2024. Some of the issues around Leap 2 is likely going to push us to earlier, to do that. But that's the best I can give you just now.
Okay, folks. The recommendations were from the Cabinet meeting held on the 28th. All the paperwork was in there. We're accepting the recommendations. Thank you very much. We're on to item 7, no long now. Item 7, Treasury Management Strategy Statement and Annual Investment Strategy for 24-25. It's 96 to 158 papers, and Robin's going to introduce this. Over to Robin.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, members. Treasury management is by definition the management of all the council's cash flows, its banking arrangements and its money market transactions. SITF's Code of Practice for Treasury Management requires that local authorities should report annually to full council on their Treasury Management strategy and plan before the start of the year, and that the Chief Financial Officer establish the reporting and monitoring processes and integrate the Treasury Management indicators into the overall financial planning process. Prudential Code for Capital Finance requires local authorities to set and revise prudential indicators in respect of debt and to publish performance against these. It's a requirement that these indicators are approved and, where necessary, revised by the same body that approves the annual revenue budget. This report therefore sets out for Council's consideration and approval the proposed approach for managing the various strands of Treasury activity for the forthcoming year, along with the prudential and Treasury indicators. Every pound that flows into and out of the Council is aggregated within the Council's loans fund for Treasury, cash flow, accounting and reporting purposes. In respect of the Council's revenue activity, as it's a requirement to set and maintain a balanced budget, over the year cash inflows from grants, fees, charges, etc. fund the outgoing expenditure on service delivery. The Treasury management activity is focused very much on managing day-to-day liquidity, ensuring cash is available to meet commitments, as well as investing any surplus balances on short-term deposit. This investment activity is undertaken in accordance with the annual investment strategy, which sets out how counterparties are selected and sets overall limits and controls in respect of the sums that can be deposited with any one institution, all aimed to manage the associated risks involved. In respect of the Council's capital activity, Treasury management is driven by the medium to longer term capital programmes of the Council, with the need to borrow being determined by the gross capital expenditure planned, less any financing available or the use of revenue and balances. The Treasury strategy is sometimes viewed as being overly technical when compared to other reports. However, a key purpose is to ensure that the Council's capital activity always remains prudent, sustainable and within affordable limits. The capital report that was just approved, considered earlier, identified indicative net expenditure of 263 million for the period 24-25 to 28-29. That reflects gross payments of 452 million, financed in part by grant receipts and other income of 188 million. This is summarised in Table 1 on page 111 of the strategy and represents the first prudential indicator. Net capital expenditure is advanced to the general fund in HRA and is repaid over the life of the assets created, usually 40 years. This is termed the loans fund principle. External borrowing is arranged to finance this expenditure, and when the interest from these loans is added to the loans fund principle, it becomes the capital financing cost or the debt charge, which forms an integral part of the revenue costs of the Council. This ensures that the cost of creating the capital assets is met by council tax and rent payers over the life of the asset. The second prudential indicator that you're asked to approve is the capital financing requirement. This is the amount of the net capital expenditure already incurred or planned to be incurred, which is yet to be repaid through annual principal repayments. This can be viewed as the outstanding mortgage of the general fund and the HRA. Table 2 on page 113 shows that the borrowing CFR is projected to increase from 563.8 million at the start of 24-25 to 752.6 million at 31st of March 2029. This movement of just over 188 million is the indicative net capital borrowing of 263 million, which is set out in the capital report in Table 1, net of principal repaid over that period of 74.7 million. To arrive at the Council's overall CFR, we add in the Council's liability for the PPP schools, which would result in a projected overall capital financing requirement at 31st March of 843.017 million. It's also a requirement to report to Council the forward repayment profile of the borrowing CFR or the loans fund advances, and that is set out at Table 3 on page 115, members. The SIPFA Code of Practice introduced the liquidity benchmark indicator for the first time last year, and this illustrates the gap between current debt levels and the gross borrowing requirement based on a forward projection of the Council's capital financing requirement. This is designed to highlight the borrowing requirement as well as being an indication of relative exposure to changes in market conditions, such as a rise in interest rates. And the current projection is set out at Table 4 on page 116. Members, capital expenditure brings a requirement to borrow to finance the longer-term cash flows, with the interest in these loans forming part of the annual revenue debt costs of the Council. Table 5 on page 117 shows the projected external debt position at the end of this financial year is a debt of 460.945 million at an average rate of 4.21%. Based on the current level of capital programme, new borrowing of 368 million could be necessary over the period 24-25 to 28-29, whilst maturing debt of 120.13 will be repaid to lenders. As a consequence of this, external debt will reach 709.986 million by March 2029. Borrowing at these levels and projected interest rates is equivalent to an additional interest of 14.557 million, with a 0.25% sensitivity of rate movements being approximately 2.8 million. And these figures are summarised in Table 6 and 7 on page 118. It's important that external debt does not exceed the level of the in-year capital financing requirement plus the projected movement over the next 2 financial years. This helps to ensure that borrowing is only taken to support capital activity and not revenue expenditure. The Council is required to consider and approve a limit on the overall borrowing level, this is termed the authorised limit, beyond which borrowing would be considered neither affordable nor sustainable, as well as an operational boundary, which equates to an in-year ceiling for borrowing. And these are set out for members' information in Tables 8 and 9 on pages 119 and 120. Members, medium to long-term affordability ultimately determines whether the capital ambitions set out in the proposed capital programme and future revisions are sustainable and prudent. The strategy in the covering report set out the forward projection for the capital financing costs or the debt charges for the period up to March 2029 based on the current capital programme and shows how they compare to budget and overall revenue streams. Table 10 on page 121 shows that the indicative level of capital expenditure required, borrowing and current budget provision, the gap between forecast debt charges and budget is approximately 9.743 million. Without any change to either the planned capital expenditure or the percentage of revenue stream allocated to debt charges, which would require an increase in budget, this would require to be funded from an appropriation from the capital fund, with the capital fund estimated to be fully expended by 2032-33 due to a recurring gap between the budget and the projected debt charges. The budget report has already painted a fairly stark picture for future revenue funding, which will limit any flexibility to increase debt charge budgets. As a result of these assumptions, the current level of capital programme is unlikely to be sustainable. A local prudential indicator was agreed in 2023-24, which limits general fund debt charges to a maximum of 8% of the net general fund revenue stream in any financial year. Current projections which are set out in Table 11 on page 122 indicate this limit will be breached in 2027-28. Changes in a number of variables such as interest rates, timing of capital programme delivery and overall revenue streams will impact in the calculation of this ratio. However, it highlights that the current indicative capital programme is unaffordable based on current forecasts and limits. Members have already noted that a wider review of the long-term strategic direction of the capital investment programme will take place, with the outcome being reported to members during 2024. In conclusion, whilst the Treasury Management Strategy Statement report sets out the current position in terms of projected affordability, these will require to be revisited as part of the wider review of capital planning and updated forecasts brought back to Council and Cabinet through future Treasury reporting. Provost, the recommendations are as stated at paragraph 2 of the report. I'll be happy to stop here and answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks very much, Robin. I'm going to open it up, members. Councillor Linton.
Thanks, Provost, and thank you for the detailed explanation as to why we have to look very closely, and it's good to have this advice in advance of what's coming down the tracks. And as we've heard from Eddie in his response to Elaine's question, I think we have to look at what we're able to deliver within a very tight envelope and maximise that. It's not a case of prioritising one over the other. We need to get the share here absolutely right and how we can proceed with our ambitious capital programme. But obviously having consensus to what you're saying about the unaffordability if we continue in our current track. So I welcome the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. And another sobering report in terms of financial situation. I think it's fairly clear from the reports we've had today, the capital programme as it stands is not affordable. We're going to have to make tough decisions. And as I said yesterday at Cabinet, I'll say again today, whilst I know that we have to have a full review of the capital programme, we must be honest with the public out there, and they must know as soon as we can, let them know what's going to be happening, what's not going to be happening. We need to be clear with people. We can't fudge it. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Members, recommended leader.
I think it's obvious there's a general election on its way to, so I think there's political solutions that lie in this in the hands of the Exchequer, and I think we have to lobby where we can, everywhere and anywhere, to make sure that one of the ways that this country, and I mean the UK as well as Scotland, is to build our way out of the recession and to put money into our hands to improve the infrastructure, including the work that we're doing in schools. So I think that's something that voters out there in their communities will be demanding of politicians as they chat the doors in the weeks ahead. And I hope it's not just rhetoric that people are able to deliver and help us in terms of delivering much needed facilities and schools and houses and everything else that goes with it.
Okay, folks, thank you. We're okay with that. I'm going to ask do we agree the recommendations? Thank you very much. Thanks, Robin. We're on to item 8, penultimate, and this is our long-term plan for our towns, and principally Kilmarnock at this paper. So we'll bring in Karen for this one. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Provost. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update in relation to the UK Government's Plan for Towns, through which Kilmarnock has been selected to receive a £20 million endowment-style fund to invest over the next 10 years, and to set this within the strategic context for regeneration of the town. Paragraphs 3 to 7 set out the background. The programme is one of community-led regeneration, with councils acting to support and empower this activity. As described in paragraphs 8 to 10, this aligns well with the strategic vision for Kilmarnock as approved by Council in December 22. Each town will have a long-term plan drawn up by a new town board to be made up of community leaders, local councils, employers and the local MP. A new High Street and Towns task force will also be established to provide direct government support. Whilst the Town Board will undertake their role having regard to its responsibilities, it is clear that the Board will build on the good work already underway, including locally through the Kilmarnock Strategic Group. Paragraphs 11 to 13 set out the priorities of the long-term plan for towns, which are split into 3 investment themes of high streets, heritage and regeneration, safety and security, and transport and connectivity, whilst underlining that activities should be driven by the needs and aspirations of local communities. Within the guidance, a menu of potential interventions has been provided, which have already been assessed as having a strong case for investment, value for money and benefit to cost ratio. The guidance states that this is not exhaustive and town boards are encouraged to think creatively about what solutions will deliver the desired outcomes. Governance arrangements are set out in paragraphs 14 to 18. The specific role of the town board will be to identify the priorities to focus on for the long-term plan for towns and to oversee the delivery of projects in conjunction with local authorities and other stakeholders. While the local authority remains the accountable body for funding and executing plans, town boards are responsible for developing the plan, working closely with local people. The independent chair of the town board must be a local community leader or local business person who holds a prominent role and someone with an obvious passion for Kilmarnock. The board has to be established and operational by the 1st of April 2024 and the chair has to be appointed during March. The chair should be invited by the council. However, given the extremely tight timescales, it is proposed that the responsibility to appoint the chair and the initial board membership should be delegated to the chief executive via engagement with a local MP. This will ensure that the chair and adequate membership of the board is in place for the inaugural meeting of the Kilmarnock Town Board, which must take place prior to the 1st of April 2024. Membership of the board can be broadened thereafter as the board deems necessary. Further essential requirements are that the local MP should sit on the board, 2 councillors and a senior representative from Police Scotland. Councils in Scotland may also wish to invite the local MSP. Other membership will be tailored to local context. The UK Government has provided an initial £50,000 capacity funding to local authorities for local stakeholder working, which will assist with the establishment of the new town board. Paragraph 19 sets out the work required to meet the requirements of the fund and the tight timescales to do so. £200,000 of additional capacity funding from the UK Government will be released to support the development of the plan, and this is in addition to the £20 million allocation. The long-term plan must comprise a 10-year vision and standalone 3-year investment plan to be produced by summer 24. A summary of the anticipated timeline to plan and enable drawdown for year 1 funding in summer is set out in paragraph 23. Whilst the objectives of the board may align to those of the Kilmarnock Strategic Group, this relationship requires further exploration as the town board becomes established and sets its priorities. It is recommended that council nominates 2 elected members to be members of the town board, and those nominated members are also to identify named substitutes to attend board meetings in their absence. The implications are set out in paragraphs 30 to 40, principally have an eye to the governance implications at paragraph 32 and the requirements being put in place and the risk implications which are covered in paragraphs 36 to 40, which sets out how the requirements are in line with the local authority assurance framework of the Levelling Up Fund. There are 9 recommendations set out in paragraph 2 and principally point to recommendations 3 and 4 around making arrangements to ensure the initial chair and board membership and the nomination of the 2 elected members to be members of the board and 2 further elected members to act as substitutes. And I'll leave it there. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks very much, Karen. That's great. I'll open it up. Leader.
Thanks. Absolutely welcome the £20 million that we got from the government to Kilmarnock. That's a great thing, you know, and it's good. You know, we've got to get the guidance here that there's laying down in terms of how we have to set up this board. But I've just got to, maybe, I think it's not like a pass-without compliment. It's really important that this complements the work that we're doing, the Kilmarnock Strategic Group, that it's thoroughly democratic and it's not too top-down. We know already in Kilmarnock we've suffered in the past, you know, bringing the people with you. Some of the developments that have happened over the decades. It's important that the people are part of that. And specifically, there's 14 elected representatives in this council that represent Kilmarnock wards, including yourself, Provost. and we're only allowed to get 2 members on it and a substitute, which is, it feels as if there's a wee bit marginalised. When you consider the amount of money that we as a council put out in over the years is substantially outweighed this 20 million. Well, it's welcome. It's certainly, we've put a lot more money in that and invested in the town. So I'll maybe just add that as a comment, but I know it will not probably change things, but I just think it's worth kind of noting. The other issue is it's very prescriptive here. There's no mention of arts and culture, yet we've got a huge investment in the Grand Holland Palace Theatre, and it's appropriate they're both joined up in the thinking here. We've got nothing in about flooding at all, which we know is peculiar, well, probably peculiar to a lot of towns, but certainly peculiar to us. There's this restrictiveness, and that's a theme that I hope we can impress on the new board that we need to address. Excuse me, Provost. Certainly in terms of the recommendation, happy to go with them, and I would nominate myself as full member with Councillor Cowan as my substitute.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost, and tend to agree that, yes, there are 14 members that represent Kilmarnock, yet only 2 here, which is a bit disappointing, but this has been handed down to us, as it appears. I hope it's not a fait accompli in terms of that, and there might be some discussion, but no discussion. At the end of the day, we have 2 members on it, and so be it. Dougie is right to mention arts and culture, that we know that the arts and culture scene in Kilmarnock is the future, really, and we see it's already successful, but it's only going to grow with the investment that's happening both at Centre Stage, Take a Bow, other groups, and of course what's happening at the Palace Theatre, which we're all, I know, really looking forward to. But I think it's important that we take cognizance of that, and hopefully through the group we can do this. Certainly in terms of the membership, it would be myself from the largest opposition group, so with my substitute being Councillor Graham Boyd. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to focus on the appointment of the chair, and I understand the argument due to the time scales that has to be an appointment, but it does feel like a missed opportunity for me. We could have had an advert out and looked to recruit someone and perhaps encourage more people to step forward and have that real community voice in this board. But hopefully going forward, the formation of the board, there will be other opportunities to build on the communication and raise that awareness.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Provost. Delighted to see this proposal come before us, and I just hope it's deeds, not words, we see. It was acknowledged by the head of the council that we received that £20 million at the October meeting. We're here, I passed a motion to suggest that the leader of the council should thank the British government for that donation of £20 million. I'm just checking to see that letter has been received, or has been sent rather.
It's certainly sent. I don't know if I got acknowledgement, James, to be quite honest with you, but I definitely sent it.
No, thanks. I'm just checking.
That's great, folks. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Not to prolong things, I do kind of object to the word donation. At the end of the day, Levelling Up Fund is there to try and level up communities and replace some of the money it lost as a result of us coming out of the EU. So I do kind of object to donation. UK government maybe just stumping up some of the money that they should be stumping up, but nonetheless, I do welcome it. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Provost. Yep. Well, it goes without saying I welcome the money as well. I think it's really good. In terms of the other board members from the community, how do we bring them on board? It is a pity Celebrate Kilmarnock isn't there anymore. That would have been really complimentary, but it's bringing other members on board. The projects, we have to think about what we're going to do here in the future with them. And just like to emphasise the point with the 20 million, please can we make sure we spend the money wisely, and we'll all have a responsibility there. Thank you.
Yeah, before I bring Eddie in, I've got a question for Karen. Sorry to put you in a spot, Karen. But item 33, the human resources aspect, who will pay for the secretariat aspect of it? Will it be the council will have to pay for those services, or will that be drawn down from that budget?
Through you, Provost, I'll come in.
and in that, I mean, it's the money is there to provide capacity building, so we've still taken a finalise that, but obviously it goes without saying there'll be full support there from the various services that are involved in this, including, you know, my own service. So we'll be looking to support this, and particularly in the bid process, in the same way that we did with the Shared Prosperity Fund. And I just maybe just to say in terms, I'll let lead it, the Chief Executive come in, and any other comments.
Thanks. So I suppose it is to say about, you know, where we are in this process. You know, it's recognised that we've got £50,000 here to do the initial setup and another £200,000 to bring together a plan by the 1st of August. So that's how early we are. We still to really understand what the legal model of a board would be. You know, if the model of the board and the ambition is that it's going to draw in more money, we need to think what is that then? You know, so but we're so early in this, it's a bit about trying to get our heads together around a plan. But just to give you assurance that, you know, where we're moving to, and, you know, obviously being a bit presumptuous as I can be, we've already got the first meeting of folk coming together next Friday, you know, and I've got to say the responses, you know, from both community leaders, including some of the folk who were involved to celebrate Kilmarnock, and local business has been fantastic in terms of people putting their hand up, and even the ones who say they can't make next Friday are saying, but I want to be involved. So it's been really good in terms of, you know, people saying that they do want to be involved and do this. The model of the £20 million is £2 million a year over 10 years. It's split into about £500,000 revenue, £1.5 million capital. So we've got the letter that actually breaks all this down for us. Of course, we'd ask, can we drop forward and just spend a lot of it next year or whatever? And the answer to that was no. You can push it back a bit, but you can't get it forward. So we're already doing that, but we're still at that exploration stage, you know, around this. And it is about how you align to a range of priorities. But it's also the bit about the UK government wanting this to be a bit different. They don't want it to be, you know, but they would say the usual thinking of how things come forward. It is that bit about how do you involve different people in thinking about the town and all the towns across the UK that they're invested in. So it's a bit kind of, if I can almost call it this, Celebrate Kilmarnock had all the ideas, but they never had a funding stream to actually resource the ideas. And this almost feels like some route for some of the funding streams that they could have had, you know, at that time. And the timing's just been difficult for us around that.
Councillor McFadden.
Yes, I'd like to also welcome the money. Obviously, it's, you know, a great thing to have. I mean, the board obviously is getting set up out with the council, and we're only going to have 2 members on it. I would like to see some method whereby that board, possibly the chairperson, comes and presents to us on some sort of regular basis at council or whatever, so the rest of us councillors can all be involved and know what's going on. I hope it was not going to just work in isolation to us, and we won't have a lot of involvement. I think, you know, despite how it's set up, I think we have a right to be very well informed and told what's going on, and ideas run past us, one way or another.
No, absolutely fine. I mean, that one on page 166 sets out what everybody's expected to do. And the 7 principles of public life. Got to conduct themselves with that. I wish everybody could do that. But it's one about, and again, that's one for us maybe to discuss, because if we're providing the service in terms of secretarial services, might be an idea to say, well, because anybody on the Buchanan Bequest Trust, it's a trust that pays for the secretarial services. So it might be an idea to make sure that that's in with the paper as it progresses, that we're not getting doing somebody else's work from here. I know it's all for the greater good, but might be an idea to look at that. So we okay, folks. In terms, Eddie, in terms of coming back, because John's absolutely right, in terms of coming back, what locus has East Ayrshire Council as elected members got with this group? Is there any?
So we don't have, as a council, we don't have oversight, you know, of the group. You know, we have representation, you know, on the group as set out there. clearly the group, will be, like influenced by the overall plans. And to be fair, as, members have said, the level of input is very, very welcome, £2 million a year over a 10-year period. But it's tiny compared to the amount of money that a council spends in an area over that period. So to actually use that as a catalyst to influence some of the things would be some of the priorities that we would do. So yes, to make sure that our representation on it is aligned, to that. One of the challenges going forward, and David kind of touched on this, there's so many different parts of this council actually impact on a town. It's how we actually don't end up with almost every officer in CMT sitting at the board is one of the challenges, because we've all got a say on it, and yet that would take a total balance away from, like where we would want to be. So it's new to us. So I suppose that looking at a wee bit of scope to give a bit of breath for that and come back and report back to you as it grows. And certainly I would anticipate, when we do that plan by the 1st of August, that's a plan that we would find somewhere bringing to, like the council to make sure it's aligned to everything that we're signed up to.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Leader?
Thanks. No, I don't want to labour this too much, but I mean, I think, it's only a year or so ago since we set up this Market Strategy Group, and one of the objectives of that was there's so many disparate groups out there that were having an influence in the town centre, and it was, I thought that was bringing all these different groups together, and it's really important how this group sits with the strategic group, and that feeds into the council as a whole, as Councillor McFadden and others are saying. So I think we need to get that right from the start, and it's really important that it's not a body that just imposes stuff into solutions at the community.
All right, that's great. Thanks. I think we've a good discussion with that one. We're accepting these proposals. Okay. Right, thank you very much. On to final item now, folks. This is item 9, and this is the motion by Councillor Jim McMahon, pages 169, and I'll let Councillor McMahon introduce this paper.
Thank you, Provost. I move the motion today that East Ayrshire Council acknowledge the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike of 1984 and its objectives of preserving communities in stature, culture and employment. And with your forbearance, Provost. Lowe, McClatchy, Houston, MacDonald, Robertson, Harnison, Curry, Glendinning, Walker, all great names that remain associated to this day to coal mining communities throughout East Ayrshire. Coal cutter, machineman, brushers, coal stripper, supply boy, on-sitter, beltman, winding engineman, all job descriptions for men who put their lives at risk for the quest for coal to fuel our industrial past and heat the homes of millions of people throughout the UK. Every one of the aforementioned has relatives who have lost their lives in the quest to provide food and a roof over their families' heads. Mr. Glendinning worked in Burnfit Pit when a roof fall killed him, leaving behind a wife and 7 children. The 2 Anderson brothers, along with Jimmy Curry, were killed in an explosion in Berry Hill and Auchinleck, leaving behind their wives and children. Knockshinnagh, the Bank, Castle, Dunaskin, Pennybeany, Kames, Glenbuck, Killock, Barney, Sorn, Howes, and a selected few of the 150 mines at one time or another in Ayrshire, where brave men put their lives at risk every day, knowing the dangers they faced, all claimed the lives of miners, leaving behind grieving mothers, families, wives, children. The disaster at Knockshinnagh in New Cumnock, September 1950, where 129 men were trapped, and of those 13 men lost their lives, was made into a movie and appropriately named The Brave Don't Cry. 7 years later, Kames Colliery in Muirkirk, 17 men were taken in an explosion ripped through the section they were working in, and what was at the time recognised as one of the safest pits in Scotland at the time. Our towns and villages throughout the coalfields in East Ayrshire were built on the foundations of coal. Some of these villages no longer exist, and are only place names in the history books. History books will also tell us of the struggles of the miners and their plight for safe working conditions and a decent living wage for their families. That fight carried on decade after decade throughout the 1900s. I pay homage and tribute to these men, for it was those men that paved the way for me to go underground in the 1970s to start my mining career in a safer working environment and with a half-decent wage. So it was March 1984, 23-year-old, I came up the pit and took part in a pithead ballot. That ballot was whether or not to take strike action, with the result being an overwhelming majority to go on strike. The reason was the threat of 75 pits closing and the associated job losses. These pithead ballots were replicated throughout Scotland, and the result taken to a national delegates conference where another vote took place favouring strike action, deeming the strike legal in Scotland. So from the 14th of March 1984 until Tuesday, the 5th of March 1985, I took part in the biggest political fight of my life, along with 160,000 of the 170,000 miners in the UK at that time. So for clarity, the strike was not for neither the improvement of work conditions underground nor for the increase in earnings. It was about the preservation of communities I was born in, raised in, worked in. The people, the homes, the workplaces, social and leisure venues, transport lifestyles that have been built on the foundations of coal. This motion is not about me documenting the events of the strike day by day, week by week throughout the long year. For all that will be well documented, archived and debated for many years to come. This motion is to recognise the well-intended reasons for the strike and its resultant impact on mining communities and indeed the wider UK. The year-long strike was an extremely difficult period in my life, as you can imagine. Trying to raise that daughter, scrounging for coal in old pit bings, risking life and limb mining coal along river banks, living off the land, stealing potatoes, turnips, and having to snare the odd rabbit or hare to take home to feed. No TV for months, struggling through Christmas. Fortunately, I had the support of my wife, and like many other miners, were backed 100% throughout that fight. So in respect to this chamber and the wider public audience, I will not use the normal descriptive words that I would use for Thatcher, but it was Thatcher, Ridley and co who planned the miners' strike for years. The Thatcher-led Tory government were hell-bent on retribution for the miners after the demise of the Heath government in 1974. That retribution would come at any cost and without any consideration given to the communities that would be left to deal with the barbaric aftermath of their plan. Killach, High House, Barnacollaries, Sornmine, Pennyvina, Luga, maintenance workshops, briquette plant, Falmers, James Cumnock Knitwear, the sweater shop, Kingsmead, the carpet factory, Western SMT garage, their drivers, private coach companies, 6,000 jobs in Cowton, all gone. Muirkirk, Cumnock, New Cumnock, Netherthorpe, Burton Park, the Logan Men Workings Clubs, all social places a long way, Cartron, Glenafton, the Top Inn. Economic impact on social and leisure activities had been catastrophic. Our communities were left industrial graveyards down to Tory policies set out to destroy not only the mining industry, but our neighbours in the steel towns and the wider manufacturing sector. Policies that were set to move away from an industrial past to a service and finance sector driven economy that would create a culture of greed, high levels of debt and eventually lead to banks crashing right across the globe. With the loss of the jobs followed the depopulation of the villages. New Cumnock from a bustling 7,000 residents to 2,800. Streets of families moved away to try and find employment. Homes demolished, leaving barren landscapes with roads to nowhere, as can be seen from the images in the montage shown on the screen. Similarities in many ways to the Highland clearances of the 1700s. I could have named every person that resided in the village of Logan when I grew up. Close, tight-knit communities where mining was the glue that bonded that community. The exodus of mining families seeking employment in other parts of the UK tore the heart out of communities. We hear the phrase used regularly that we move further away, from carbon-emitting fuels, of just transition, where vulnerable communities and the people within them are not left behind, and that it won't create or exacerbate inequalities or cause other unintended economic and social harms. It was no a just transition that Thatcher and her colleagues penned. It was a just make them pay and let them suffer at any cost plan. The resultant years since the strike have seen poverty levels soar, with parts of East Ayrshire being categorised amongst the highest in the rankings in relation to the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, and life expectancy levels falling throughout mining communities. Last year, we saw 1,646 food banks in the UK, with 3 million people almost using them. We'll ask ourselves a question. given a nation of such considerable wealth, why are we subjected to such poverty levels? Miners were, and still are, though a dying breed, proud individuals that believed the fight throughout their lives for their communities was one that could never be forsaken for the future of the generations that would follow in their footsteps. Provost, I'm going to finish by saying, as elected members, we sit in this chamber today and we do our best to serve our communities that put their faith in us at the ballot box. Our capabilities are limited and our ambitions to grow and make our communities more prosperous, safer and enjoyable places for families to grow up in. The decimation of our manufacturing and industrial past leaves us in despair as we try and mitigate the impact of limping from one cost of living crisis to another. It's my opinion that will never change, that this is the result of Thatcher's Britain, and for that we'll never ever forgive and never ever forget. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Provost. There's not much more I can say after that. It's a lifetime ago. I hope some of you have never to fight the way that we tried to fight. Fight and be defeated. We're still defeated. We're still fighting the same common enemy. We didn't preserve our communities. We didn't preserve the jobs. And we're not going to. That's the sad thing about it. The good thing about it is the camaraderie of the men that was then in the mining industry was fantastic. When they started dribbling back to their work, and there's a name for them, but I'll not use it today, they couldn't produce coal because they weren't the coal years. They couldn't produce coal. And I produce coal in different places. I can't produce coal anywhere now. And I don't want to be quite honest. But at the time, and I say this often, my mother says to me, "Happy birthday, son. You start the Barney Pit in Windy." And that was 1961. I saw the Barney Pit close because of the accident. I went to Lochlee mine, which was outside Mauchline. Then went to Soren mine, shut. Then I went to the Killer. I got my residency notice in 1986 on a Sunday morning. I was out of work and I thought I was 40-year-old. If you're saying to yourself, you're not that age, are you? But I thought then that I was never going to work again. I was working within 3 weeks. In an industry that was the same, well, it was a private industry. And how they ever passed the tests with the inspectors and things that the National Coal Board had to pass, I'll never know. Because it was horrendous. But, as I say, on a different time, we tried to bring a motion quite a few years ago, myself and Barney Mingus, which got defeated in here. And I certainly hope this one doesn't get defeated today. I was proud to be fighting for my jobs, my family, and my community. Since then, the only sad thing I've got is in all the years that I was working in the community, they let the coal board away with everything. They gave you a retraining for another job. I didn't want to do the other job, it was a welder. I passed the tests, but I didn't want to go, and I didn't go. Going back to that photo that's in the board now, you wouldn't think it was a miner's pit. I thought it was a policeman's pit. That in there, that's a leader. She was a common enemy then, and she's my common enemy yet. She's dead, but her hereditary policies are still here, pounding us into the ground every day. And I'm pleased to second this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, folks. I'm going to open it out for some discussion. Councillor Lennox.
Sorry. Thanks, Provost. I'd like to commend and thank Councillor McMahon and Councillor Crawford for putting forward this motion, which I totally support. I was 16 when I left the school in summer of 1977. My father was a joiner and he worked me within an inch of my life not to get into the building trade because he said there was no future in it. So I started with the coal board that year as an apprentice electrician in Sorn Mine. And my father was well pleased. He said, "Well done, son, that's a job for life." Little did he know. I actually remember my father shouting at me as I went out the door to go for my pit medical. He says, "Don't worry about that, son." He says, "They'll only need to hold you up to the lift." Because at that time I was only about 9 stone and a 28-inch waist. So my father had a sense of humour. He said I was no bigger than a skelf. Just so that folks can, you've heard a couple of times Sorn Mine has been mentioned. I served my time there, and Sorn Mine wasn't a mechanised pit. Everything was done by hand. It was all hand stripping. And the coal face was divided up into what they called stints. And each stint was maybe about 8 to 10 years long, containing 20 tonnes of coal, which the coal face worker had to sit on his knees and shovel on a daily basis a shift of 20 tonnes onto a conveyor belt that ran behind him. It was backbreaking work, and it doesn't really surprise me that a lot of the men didn't get to reach retirement age because of the conditions they were working in. When I was serving my time, the pit closures were ongoing. You had Penny Veeney down at Dumelton, 1978. Some of the men out of that pit transferred up to Sorn. You had the Roger up at Kirkconnell, which shut in 1980. You had High House in Auchinleck, which closed in 1983, the same year as Sorn. And it should also be noted that at High House you had the last remaining working winding engine that was steam driven. And that steam engine was built by a Kilmarnock company in 1896, Grant Ritchie and Co Limited, right here in Kilmarnock. So a bit of heritage there as well. And it was at that point I transferred to the Killach, just shortly before the strike started in 1984. As far as I'm concerned, the strike was entirely justified. Jobs were being lost at an incredible rate, and there wasn't any alternative work in that part of the authority that I represent either. Mining was the heart and soul of the communities. And at that point in time during the strike, coal, not dole, was the rallying call. And it certainly struck a chord and brought us all together for that specific cause. Provost, I think the strike was a definitive period in our local history for a couple of notable reasons. Firstly, an entire industry was completely obliterated with absolutely nothing to replace it. The mines were the beating hearts of our communities, and mining until then had provided generations within our communities with a steady income and a strong sense of belonging. A whole culture and identity had grown around coal mining, and with the loss of the mines, much of the cultural and social activities as well as infrastructure that had grown around it, from brass bands, pipe bands, working men's clubs and coal board sponsored events disappeared almost overnight. The loss of the coal industry caused devastation across large swathes of this authority, and some places still haven't recovered to this very day. Secondly, and perhaps more contentiously, and I think Councillor Crawford alluded to it, but a large proportion of our communities also completely lost faith in the police during that strike. Especially towards the end of the strike, it was blatantly obvious to the majority of us who were peacefully picketing and committing no offences that the police authorities involved in managing the activities at that time were allowing themselves to be used as political tools. And I'm totally convinced that a distrust and lack of faith in the police stemming from that time lingers on and today in parts of our community down in the south of the authority, making the best efforts of our local community policing teams to engage in these neighbourhoods extremely difficult. I was 23 back then, and even now in my 60s, my blood still boils when I see a Yulin Dodds wagon. They do say that time heals, but for me, on a personal level, that anger hasn't waned in 40 years. Provost. My fondest memories during that time are the hours spent on a peaceful and good-natured picket line, as well as in the strike centre in Mauchline, where they kept us fed and watered entirely in the generosity of donations from local residents and businesses. And no words can express the debt of gratitude that I owe to my own family and friends for their unwavering support during that period. Not once did they question our actions or convictions. And I'd also like to thank East Ayrshire Council, because unbeknown to me at that time, they were allowing us to use the Cooper Suite in Mauchline Community Centre and also Nan Stinnock's in Mauchline. On a lighter note, I'm just trying to lighten it up a wee bit because it is quite emotive. But I'll also have to say that during the summer of 1984, the normally Peely Wally miners had great tans and were looking a lot much fitter and healthier than usual. Provost, I fully support this motion brought forward by Councillors McMahon and Crawford, and I'd like to thank you for indulging an ex-miner a short time to say these few words. Thank you.
We've got 2 or 3 folk that want to talk, so Councillor Stewart.
Provost, a female version of what went on in the miners' strike. So I also would really like to thank Councillor McMahon, Councillor Crawford and Councillor Lennox, because that was really quite emotional at the end there. But as a proud daughter of a miner, my dad went to the coalface at 14. And we forget that there was women in the pits because my mum worked in the canteen, and so did my aunties. Until the day he retired, my dad, from 14 to 65, he worked in the pits. And we did feel the impact of the strike. When I say we have nothing, we did have nothing. Like we were begging off our neighbours and things like that. We didn't have a lot. And that wasn't a bad thing because people supported one another and communities came together. But I always remember the French miners sending over shoes and wellies and Christmas presents. So Wayne's wouldn't go out in the morning at Christmas and folk fighting over shoes and wellies and things like that. Going to the soup kitchen and actually going to the picket lines with family members. The facts are that Margaret Thatcher and her Conservative government devastated the coalfield communities. In fact, new statistics by the University of Sheffield show that these communities are still suffering to this day, and if no worse. So just now we've got 4th generation of unemployment, we've got very low attainment, we've got the highest rates of child poverty, and we will never recover for the evil that was inflicted on our communities in March 1984. So I really thank thank the 3 gentlemen today for their motion, but for us never to forget the hardships that the Conservative government and Margaret Thatcher inflicted on ordinary hard-working miners and their families. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Thanks. As Elaine said there, it has been emotional speeches there, and I thank all the councillors for what they've said. It's been very enlightening to hearing the real stories. Councillor McMahon mentioned Thatcher early on, And I think there's a really good paper called The Impact of Neoliberal Political Attack on the Health, the Case of the Scottish Effect by Chick Collins and Jerry McCartney. And the miners, as I remember, being a member of a trade union and working in Glenfield and Kennedy, we thought if the miners got a decent pay rise, Ken, we'd all got a decent pay rise. Now, Ken, that strike was nothing to do with pay. But I think there was an attack on organised labour, because that's what the miners were, organised labour. And even today, in some papers that we get in this place, Ken, we're always going to invite entrepreneurs to come and see our skill wains. And I think we should be inviting trade unionists like Mick Lynch and Dave Ward and that to talk to kids and show them what it means to be involved in organised labour to benefit, Ken, themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Some really emotional speeches today, and when Willie mentioned the Hewland Dodge lorries, probably the earliest memory I have, because I was just a wee boy during the miners' strike, was members of my family getting huckled after lobbing bricks at Hewland Dodge lorries. You know, a tough time. My dad worked in the pit. My papa worked in manufacturing the equipment for the pit. My great-grandfather was crippled, you know, never walked again after being smashed up in a pit. So it's always been close to my heart, and hearing some of the stories today does take you back a bit, and remembering, you know, the really tough times that so many communities had. I'm originally from Lanarkshire, as most of you know, and it absolutely devastated Lanarkshire in the same way it did Fife and Ayrshire. Our communities have not recovered. I think that's absolutely clear. And no matter what we try and do, the scars, and it will never really heal. But it is so important that we don't forget. And as Provost, as you know, as a gay man, I am proud to wear my Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners badge. And if any of you want to know a wee bit more about the LGSM and what they did for the miners' strike, if you watch the film Pride, and it's set down in the Welsh Valleys, it's well worth a watch. But you know, the men and women, and the men in particular in the NUM who accepted gay men and lesbians for the first time, and actually supported and voted for equal rights in their conference in the aftermath of the miners' strike, means that solidarity will never be forgotten. And from my point of view, that's something that we must always remember. In so many ways, our mining communities and our miners were trailblazers, and we must never forget the devastation caused by Thatcher and our rotten government. Thank you, Provost.
No, thank you. Leader.
Thanks, Provost. I will not say too much. Just really, just one of the most. I've been here the length of time, as I keep saying. 1995, I came to East Ayrshire. Some of the most emotional debate I've witnessed here. Good on you. I think you and I remember 1984 way back then. They'll try and draw us all together here. It politicised us all. You and I, Jim, different politics, and then we agreed, but we had one common enemy, as we still have today. And I think what I'd like to see, these stories need to be told. There's a legacy here that we need to tell the young people, because it's 40 years ago, and you know, there's folks through there never heard the Electric Light Orchestra, you know, and just this is what so I've been flipping, but I mean, I think the whole story and how it has affected the entirety of East Ayrshire. It never really affected Command to the same extent, but I can remember the miners in the care coming through Belfield. They probably went through on thank Jim, and we're coming out this whatever we had to support the miners. So, well done today.
No, thanks, folks. Just a couple of anecdotes. I'll stay with the political side. I've got this on. But I remember as a wee boy, I was at the Navy then, and my mum, I took my mum for a shopping every week, drove her up, and I had to get a trolley, and everything she put in her trolley for the family, I had to put something into the trolley, and that was given to the miners. My mum did that every week. But also, and maybe Barry's been here before, when as Provost you go to diamond weddings, platinum weddings, mostly in the south of the authority, invariably it's a mining family you're going to visit. And it's fascinating to ask the husband, who's in his 80s, 90s, what did you do? I was a miner, son. And you say to the lady of the house, what did you do? I was a skivvy. Me and my mum boiled the water, cooked the food, boiled the water, cleaned the house, boiled the water, washed the clothes. And I remember, son, when they put showers in at the pit heat. That was in the early 50s. So that's in living memory. So the power of trade unions is not to be absolutely forgotten about. I'm still a proud member of my trade union. And if it wasn't for trade unions, we would be in a worse state. And the sentiments of today, and it's great because this is the anniversary this year. And it's great that you brought this motion. So well done for that. Yep, absolutely, Jim.
Professor, if there's nobody else going to speak, just my thanks to the Chamber today for the way the motion has been received, and it's of no slant on my Conservative colleagues that's in here today that works tirelessly, the same as we do, to serve our communities. It's been nostalgic, it's been emotional. It is recorded or took part in a donation for the National Art Galleries, so this will never ever go away. It'll always be remembered, and as long as until I draw my last breath, it will still be remembered. So thank you, Provost, and thanks to the Chamber for the time.
Thank you very much, folks. Have a good weekend. I hope things are a lot safer in the world coming up. Thank you.
Could we stop the recording, please, Ian?